Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jeff Rock, and welcome to another D. Hilton Associates webinar. We've got a lot of ground to cover today, so we'll get started pretty quickly here. But first, we want to cover over some administrative items. We will be recording this webinar, so in about 3 to 5 days, we'll post a recording of this on our website. Go ahead and check that out just in case you've missed any in the past. We have a full reference point of ones we've done in the past there as well. If you have any questions throughout the process, go ahead and feel free to either use the chat section or you can use the Q&A section. The chat section, you can actually broadcast your question to the entire group, or the Q&A section will come just to us only. So go ahead and get it started. Joining me today, we have John Andrews. Hey, John, how are you?
Good afternoon.
We also have David Hilton. How are you, David?
I'm fine, thank you.
And joining us for the first time this time is Brian Kidwell. How are you, sir?
Doing good.
Fantastic. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and kick it over to John. John, take it away.
It's great to have everybody online with us today and look forward to a pretty good discussion with the folks in the room and hopefully questions that come out of this. When you look at the 35 years that we've been in business, we've really seen this progression to entitlement type of pay programs to really pay for performance. I think we've had a part in that move. When you look at entitlement, you think of systems that reward seniority, tenure. If you don't really screw up, you go to the next step along the progression line. And that really came from a lot of sponsors. When you look in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, credit unions were based with military, installations. They were based in the government civil service. And when we look at that, where that came from, it really came from pre-World War II, and where salary ranges were invented. And salary ranges simply meant a minimum is what I'd pay an apprentice to do the job. They were not competent. They had a way to get to competence, so we paid them kind of below market. We defined midpoint as market, equal to what the market would pay for total skill acquisition, and then the max or the stretch is what we would pay for the most we were willing to pay. But when you get into executives, that was based on manufacturing. That was not based on financial services. So the idea as we transition to pay for performance, it's a really good tool for credit unions because you really get to focus on your pay philosophy, not how long a person's been there. So you think what your members want, do they care that your CEO's been there 30 years or 3 years? They just want a good credit union. That's how they're going to vote. So when we look at pay for performance, what we're able to do is not overcommit dollars to seniority, but to commit dollars to where we have performance. And when we look at our high performers out there, they do three things really well. They're strong strategic planners, and that becomes the base of how they determine pay. They develop good metrics of how they define success. And then they have good calibration. They make it achievable. They don't make it too stretchy. They don't make it too easy. If you do those three things in an executive comp plan, you're going to be one of those high performers. You're going to get value for your members. You're going to get recognition, a tool to recognize your employees or executives for doing a good job. And then finally, you're ultimately a really good stewards for your credit union membership. So today's discussion is up here on the screen. It's not what you pay, it's what you pay for. And that's kind of the holy grail of discussion. Just because a person's been there 25 years shouldn't be the best paid person out there. If and only if when, they're the top performers in their peer group or they're executing the strategic plan. So today's agenda, 5 key things we want to go through. The first thing is, especially with the pandemic, what we started with may not be what we want to end with. What we thought would be a good forecast, what we thought would be good numbers to hit are obviously not going to be in the same ballpark. So how do we transition a plan in mid-year is the kind of the crux of the discussion today. We also want to look at the optics. The idea that we know members are unemployed now, more than they have in the past. We know we are looking at different things for furloughing employees or, freezing pay systems and those types of things. So how's the optics look if we keep an incentive plan or pay for performance going? And we'll show you that connection there. And the idea, there's a cost of changing things. There's a long-term impact if we change the rules too often. And the idea, we're going to kind of make the case today that you really need to stay the course. If you've committed to pay for performance, it's not the time to take a year off. And then finally, we're going to look at this concept of leadership under crisis. The idea of how well we were prepared for a pandemic, how we executed a pandemic, and how we're going to come out of this stronger. And there's a lot of good things that we can talk about there. So to kind of set the stage, we're doing virtual board meetings now. We do 8 or 9 a month, and David does, and Brian does the same amount. And we see there's no panic in the industry. Do you see anything that's out there like that?
No, everybody is very calm, and the concept of Zoom meetings and doing meetings afar is not a problem to boards. It's certainly not a problem to management.
Yeah. And Brian, you're not seeing.
No.
Yeah. So Brian's going to be the ultimate guest on a talk show, right? Well, tell us all about it. Not much to tell.
Maybe.
It was good.
It's going pretty good.
But the point of the story is, I think we're really dialed into what we needed to do. We prepared the contingency plans. We got everybody out, working from home. We're bringing people back safely. We're keeping that member safely. So the idea, if there was any panic in the room, we would have saw a lot of these plans just go away. Like, we're shutting them down. And we did a research study March, April, and May. Only 5% of the credit unions really took that path of saying, let's shut it down and wait. Most people are really forging ahead, as we would say. So what makes this year special is, how do we keep people safe? How do we help members cope with their financial hardships that they're going to do and protect that balance sheet? And if you think about that in a classic pay for performance or a balanced scorecard, what's in there? All of those elements in a good year or a bad year or a tough year or a middle of the road year are there. So it's really building the case that let's don't change the rules too often on this. So for the folks that don't use balanced scorecards, simply think of it as this concept where you're not overemphasizing 1 or 2 metrics to define success, but you're looking at a program that will look at multiple areas, and there's consequences. If you overweight in one area, the expense could be another area. For example, if I gave you, Brian, an incentive plan that said all you have to do is reduce expenses by 20%, and I'll get you a boatload of cash, can you do it?
Absolutely.
What would you do?
Just cut.
Where's my hatchet, right?
Yeah.
If there's a leak in the roof,
Get a bucket.
Get a bucket.
get a bucket. That's right.
Who's got some bubble gum?
Carpet's got holes in it. No problem.
Don't walk there.
Yeah. Just don't trip on it.
Yeah. That's what he does in our office. He's really good at that, by the way. But you think of a scorecard, think of 4 areas. The first, that top right quadrant, what are we doing for our member/owner? And that's the safety and soundness of a plan, the financial metrics that are there. And a lot of the older plans, that's what you really focused on. But if you do that operating expense reduction, what's at the expense of?
Members, employees.
Yeah, your employees, the morale is going to be hard. The culture is going to be eroded. The members are going to have to wait on the phone. They're not going to have experienced employees helping with them. So yeah, we want you to cut expenses, Brian, but we don't want member satisfaction to drop, is the key. And then our members, customers. So we use that distinctly. Anybody for $25 can be a member, right? You have a share account. But if you're a customer, you're using, checking account plus a loan. So we want to call that kind of niche of our overall membership. And how do we measure that? Usually through feedback tools, transaction surveys, how they're using products, what's in their wallet. And then that third quadrant, what we call risk monitoring, is how well you're executing the strategic plan. You spent a boatload of time putting a plan together. What does the future look like? 3 years down the road, 1 year down the road. What are we going to do to be successful? What's the next market we're going into? And then we're looking at the risks if we don't do this. The pros of doing it, the cons, and then the board pulls the trigger and says, this is what we want to do, and the team executes that. And then the final component is governance. How well do we measure the relationship between the CEO and the board, or the executive team and the board? So David, what do you think is the most important of the quadrants here?
I think the most important is the members, but I think what's overlooked is the employees. We look at the percentages of credit unions that have member survey as part of their metrics, and employee survey or employee satisfaction, and those 2 percentages are way down there relative to financial performance and board satisfaction.
Yeah, for me, I think I kind of gear towards the governance piece. Not a lot of times it's not what gets done, but it's the how. And sometimes we have to be on the same page, because Brian said, I can get you what you want financially, but you're not going to like it. It's going to be these areas where we're going to have to cut or sacrifice. So when a board says, yes, you accomplished it and check the box, but then says, I liked how you did it, I think is a very key tool. And
I know I agree 100%. One of the issues though is waiting.
yeah,
And weighting the four components or the 10 components, however you divide it up, is key. So when you look at board satisfaction, for argument's sake, it doesn't necessarily have the same weight as some of the other indicators. And just a quick story, a number of years ago, a board chairman came to me and said, we've got a great credit union. We're doing terrific financially. We're meeting all our objectives, but the CEO is not answering our questions. We'll ask questions at the board meeting, and we either get the answer that it's not your business, or we get the answer that I'll get back to you, and then he or she doesn't ever get back to the board. So the chairman asked me, he said, well, what do you think we should do? And I said, change the weighting. They had about a 25% weighting on board satisfaction. I said, you have every right to change the weighting for next year. Make board satisfaction 60 or 70%. And
message, huh?
There's a message there. You'll get his attention as far as what's important to the board. And they did, and he did, and everybody was satisfied. And then they went back to the original weighting of the metrics.
Yeah. One of the things I like to tell our clients is, like, if I come back 5 years and you're using the same metrics and the same weights, you really haven't accounted for the evolution of your business. And so after that,
You bring a really good point. And I think.
Well, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. The employee piece is, when we think about what's going to help our members through the pandemic, what's going to, impact member satisfaction and things of that nature, it comes down to employees. And there's something that it was about a week or two ago. There's an S&P 500 oil and gas company. I won't say who. It's pretty obvious. But it was interesting. They cut, in order to maintain their dividend, they cut their 401k match altogether, 6%. And shareholders, of course, are very happy. But when I heard about that, I thought, what kind of message does that send to the employee base? And longer term, what are the repercussions? Because while oil and gas is hurting right now, it won't necessarily be hurting forever. And obviously that was a decision that their management team made. And obviously we're not publicly traded companies, but I think your point on the employees is a really good one when we're thinking about balanced scorecards, especially in a time of crisis, that we got to be careful not to make decisions that positively impact net income, ROA, capital at the expense of leaving behind those that are going to help us to get to where we need to be.
well, that's MBA school 101, right? In times of crisis, the two cardinal sins you should not do is cut marketing and cut your HR practices.
Right.
And if those are easy too, because it's easy to wipe that line out. But the companies that emerge step on the throats, they double down in those areas, and they come out on top. And again, credit unions, you have to have that same discussion as, I'm sure all the boards are looking for, can we shave a little here, a little of this? Because, we know the revenue is not going to be here, but what can we do to protect and preserve those areas? So the backstory, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but just to get everybody on the same page, the three key things that we see really impacted this year was, obviously, some states have one hand tied behind their back. They are state credit unions. Their states have said, you have to do loan modifications. You can't charge fees. You have to work, and it's just across the board. So, when you used a NSF, a bounce check fee to, recognize a negative behavior, guess what? Bounce away. And so when we look at how much on the revenue forecast you use for fee income and loan income, guess what? Two of your big chunks. And let's do a triple threat, right? And let's let investments, rates come down and slowly come down on what we have to use.
Slowly. Yeah, right.
Add
That's
in the potential of delinquency.
And we don't even know what that is.
We don't know what it is yet,
Yeah.
but it's going to be some number greater than we've seen in the past.
Yeah. And in that area, when you look at the third bullet, what we're talking about, I think David does a great job of explaining this. If 2 years ago, if you followed your loan policy and practice and it was a good loan, it was a good loan. You don't need to apologize for that.
Right.
It's out of your realm that some of these once in a lifetime events are going to happen. So rather than historically harping about why in the world would we make that loan, we need to move forward and say how we're going to deal with the
Right.
delinquency, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then it's just this weird fun. Who raise your hand out there if you budgeted double-digit deposits. Anyone? Nobody would have said that. They said that'd be a rookie mistake. There's no way, unless you're talking merger. And if you're talking merger, that's all off. But nobody was doing this, and we're seeing that everywhere. Big towns, little towns, big communities, small communities. And again, every ratio that uses assets as a denominator is affected by this right now. So we know that more is not better. So in a strategic plan or an incentive plan that says we want to do more than last year, this is the year you're not going to get that.
You have a point there with assets that I think needs to be addressed as well. And that is when assets grow the way they've been growing at credit unions, it's a flight to safety.
Yeah.
And what's wonderful about that is there's a message there that the member, the consumer, thinks that credit unions are safe and that it is a flight to safety. And at one point in time, if you go back long enough, about when Lincoln was president, the problem
there
was
would be only one person in the room that would remember that.
That'd be Brian. But all kidding aside, if you go back far enough, credit unions didn't even have the visual visibility of being the financial institution that had flight to safety. So I think it's been wonderful from that perspective.
I mean, how we position the brand, you think over the years, it's like, yeah, we are legitimate, we're safe, we're sound, and we were born to do this. If you look at your true mission statement, you're supposed to be here for members when in these times. And so guess what they're doing? They're taking you up on your offer. And you would say, not everybody at once, please, but they're doing it. So when we look at the context, this really says like what you budgeted for the beginning of the year is not how you're going to end up. So how do we transition a pay for performance plan, an incentive plan, a merit budget to accommodate this? So let's go through some of that real quick. One of the things that we talk about is we know from studies, 80% of, now this is Fortune 500 world, say that financial indicators alone don't tell you the strength of our balance sheet. From an accounting perspective, and like Brian, you said, on Wall Street, it looks good when we chop and slash and protect the dividend, but they don't want to be held accountable to that. So like David is the only former credit union CEO in the room. What was the hardest metric for you to explain, the soft metric to your boards, and even today when you work with boards?
Well, it wasn't quite soft, but it was employee satisfaction. Going back to that again,
yeah.
The problem with employee satisfaction is really twofold. First, it's typically geared towards compensation. So if you ask the employee, are you satisfied with your compensation? You're going to get some very negative answers, and maybe rightly so. I mean, they probably haven't gotten a raise in at least 6 months, maybe as long as a year. And even if they did get a raise, most people are not happy with their compensation in general. The second problem is that employee satisfaction studies are typically not done by a professional organization. They're typically done in-house, and there's a real significant difference between doing it in-house and doing it with a professional organization that knows what type of questions to ask and how to ask those questions so that you're getting responses that make sense and can actually weigh the answers as it relates to other organizations, other years, and things of that nature. So I think it's a twofold problem. If you go back into the last recession we had, the 2008, 9, 10 recession, there weren't very many raises given. So if you did an employee satisfaction survey and you did it yourself, you'd probably get some very negative responses. And again, if you're not asking questions about the quality of leadership. You're not asking questions about communication channels. You're not asking questions about promotional opportunities. Then you're missing the boat.
What I'm worried about is if you're doing an employee survey this year, for example, and you don't position it well, people are worried about keeping their job.
Right.
And they're going to say things like, it's going to be like a Putin election. 99.9% of the employees love their job, love their CEO, love the place. You got to get to the crux of that. So in 08, 09, what happened was we got okay. But then when we started emerging out of that, we got, hey, I'm fine, but the guy next to me is really upset. He's leaving. As soon as he can find something for 25 cents more, he's out of here. And then it became, if you didn't keep up with the market in that third or fourth survey, it was, screw it, I'm out of here now. It took you but 5 years to get to the real answer. Same thing like with the exit interviews. Sometimes if you don't ask those right, it's, it's not you, it's me. That's why we're breaking up. Brian, you know that, right? It happened to you many times.
What are you trying to, what are you saying?
Here's some tissues. I'm sorry. I brought that up. But the point of the story is, the tool, you can pull any tool off the internet and you can, the math will work, but it's the context. It's how we've got the culture set up. Do they feel comfortable and safe giving true answers? Those are the things that give you some meaningful data there.
Yeah, you can find questions that you can get an answer to. Is it the actual question or the actual answer that you need?
And the worst thing is, like, if you have an executive incentive plan and said, this year we're going to do, if it's a to-do list, this year we're going to do an employee opinion survey, and then you check the box with those types of answers, you check the box. Congratulations. Did you move your culture? Did you move the business? Did you help retention? No, those types of things. So just a quick plug. Next week, our compensation forecast comes out. It's our 19th. And obviously it's a little different this year because we're trying to measure what people are doing next year. So thank you all you out there that have helped us with the forecast and taken our calls to listen about this. But one of the things that we always do is, what are the top metrics that we're seeing in executive plans this year as we move forward? So here's the top 10. And board satisfaction is number one and has been number one forever, because people, whether they have a formal incentive plan or just an evaluation, there's a lot of folks that, put that in the mix. Now, the 7% that don't, I think it's sometimes what?
Well, it's just basically financial, or it's nothing. It's just a gimme.
Yeah, that's a mindset of the opposite of a balanced scorecard is, hey, just get me an ROA and then we'll judge you on that and that. And in the old days, I actually saw plans in the 80s I'd pay you for assets. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I'll pay you $500 for every 2 million. And
assets grew.
You know who loved those plans? NCUA. They said, just do that all over the place. No, that I think it put one of my kids through college.
But if you look at the list, employee satisfaction is not even on the top 10 list.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to bring out today, is those soft metrics that you think you shouldn't pay for are what are going to drive your overall success. Now, the ones in gold or yellow, whatever color you want to call that, return on assets, net worth, delinquency, operating expense, those are all that Brian's going to talk about a little bit later about this year was definitely impacted. So the D. Hilton kind of stands on this. We don't want you to give up or don't want you to eliminate those from the plan because, we're not going to hit it, but we might look at how we want to modify or the context we want to use it in. If you're a good salesperson and you're getting paid sales commission and you get an annual plan, and in October, you're not going to hit your numbers for the year. So you're getting nothing. What do you do November, December?
Not much.
This year is over.
Yeah, right. That's the point. You're moving every sale possible in the next year, right?
Yeah.
You're going to sit on it and say, yeah, let's get back. And when your
sale
boss
done
says,
in January is a mistake. You messed up. You missed that end.
Yeah. But the boss is going to be hammered. Why don't you get me sales? I'm working hard. They're just not, they're not ready to commit. And all of a sudden, January, you're back in the game. We see that sometimes in incentive plans with credit unions is you want to finish strong. And so the programs that we worked, we had a lot of mid-year reviews, check-ins with our boards to say, you want to keep going? Do you want to modify? And again, like we said, only 5% out there really said, let's shut it down, which I think makes it strong towards finish strong.
Well, I think you want to be strong at the beginning, be strong at the middle, be strong at the end. It's not just finish strong, it's staying strong throughout the whole process.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. So we talk about the soft stuff a little bit more, and we talked about the member and employee surveys as being so important. what's so interesting at companies, you are great at putting your culture and your values and your missions on granite, on posters, on the websites. But then when you see the reality, are you walking the walk? So again, getting these third parties and these to help you measure some of those things are very, very important. And not, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and just for a plug, we are one of those third parties.
Let's mark when that is. We can edit that out.
Clip that right out.
So let's go into what I know a lot of volunteers have said to themselves. And one of those things is, okay, let me get this straight. Now we pay a big old bonus to our CEO when times are good, but wait, you want me to pay a big old bonus when times are not so great? And the answer is, big old bonus is a relative term. I said, how did we execute those plans? So I think the idea that the things that we look at here, kind of the rule of thumb that we've given our clients, and it's not too late, guys, to put this into the mix, even though we're going to be getting into the fourth quarter of the year, is number one, if at mid-year you were kind of in the threshold of your plan, just let's let the chips fall where they may, and let's just finish strong. Okay. Let's keep the existing plan. The second thing is, if you want to replace some of the financial metrics based on some of those calculations, and Brian's going to show you this in just a second here, don't think of it as a make whole award. Maybe you say the target was 30%. Maybe the target is more in your threshold range. Maybe it's 25%. And again, that'll be aligned with your business. We don't think that's the best option, but that is an option that you can look at. And then with either of those two decisions, you still have to do an evaluation. I mean, this is part of your culture, is to give feedback to the CEO or to the executive team. I mean, the board member says they know they're doing a good job. I don't have to pat them on the back, or they don't respond well. I don't know who doesn't. I don't know who. I think they want the recognition that what they did to get out of the jam, or get us back on track, so to speak. So right now, we want to just give you kind of like a few examples of how we might look at the math and see the impact on if you wanted to modify metrics. I want to turn over to Brian real quick.
This is my first time here. So when do we take callers?
Well, we'll say we try to keep it to about 50 minutes, so we'll save time for Q&A. But if you see a question pop up that you want to answer on the fly, you're more than welcome.
Okay, so
this is a good John's a great person to answer. I just didn't know.
Well, because
the format.
Because we're in Houston, and this is where the Astros play. We don't ask the trash we get when the trash talking.
We don't take calls.
No, we don't take calls. We stop taking calls. Oh, we do have a question. Board satisfaction is arbitrary. So how is that defined or measured? May I take that before you get started?
No, that's what I was thinking.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for mentioning that. Board satisfaction can be a structured exercise. It can be a quantitative exercise. It doesn't have to be a feelings type of exercise. And let me give you an example of that. When you were in school and the teacher said, write a 1,000-word essay on anything you want, what was the hardest part of that exercise?
Getting to number 999.
Yeah, I stopped writing. I kept counting the words. I'm never finishing. Close, but not, what's the second most important thing? What's the topic? What am I going to write on? But if your teacher said, okay, write a 1,000-word essay on what you did for your summer vacation, then you at least had some prompts or structure to get going. So when you look at board satisfaction and we structure the exercise, think of the balanced scorecard. How did we do on the financial components this year? How did we take care of the members this year through board satisfaction? Then the narrative starts to build away from, I think he did good. I think she did great. I think it was better than last year. And it gets you some structure. So in our database, we have over 60,000 volunteers that have taken our surveys over the last 5 years or so. So we're able to look at, quantifying that exercise. But it's like anybody in an evaluation, and, with our volunteers especially, you've been burned by a bad evaluation. You've been burned by a bad boss that didn't take it serious. You've been burned by a boss that's everybody got 5s out of 5, or everybody got 3 out of 5s because nobody walks on water. So there's ways to do it, but it's got to be structured. And one of the things we'll talk about at the end here is we've developed an evaluation tool to look at leadership under crisis, and we're happy to send that out to anybody that wants it. So we'll circle back with that, finish that question up at the end here.
So here on this slide 13. So we're talking a little bit about return on assets, things that can impact that ratio. Quick reminder, return on assets, basically your net income divided by your assets. Things that can impact this ratio, eliminating or waiving fees. And I guess the point to this conversation is that some of these things we have done, right? As a result of the pandemic, we're eliminating fees, we're waiving fees, we're postponing loan payments so that people can work through hard times. So some of these things are self-induced, so to speak, to help members, get through the pandemic and keep going. So eliminating waiving fees, obviously with less income, in means less ROA. Reduced interchange income. If everyone's sitting at home, there's only a limited amount of credit and debit charge usage that they can have. Skip a payment programs, obviously skipping payments to be able to, push loan payments forward is something that I think every credit union is doing in some form or fashion. Increased mortgage related income. I know that those listening have been probably as surprised as we were at how strong the mortgage market has been, despite the fact that we had people basically shelter in place for 60 days. And I mean, even thinking in 2008, 2009, that was one area when I'm talking to clients that has been, they're talking record months.
Well, it makes sense. If you spent the 60 or 90 days in your house, you'd find every
Time for a bigger
crack,
house.
This place is a dump.
Yeah.
I got to get out of
every
here.
crack and every crevice, and you want to get out.
Hey guys, it's not house, it's slash school slash workspace slash spa slash
But
sauna.
it has been interesting because you would have thought with so much uncertainty, a lot of people would say, you know what, I'm going to hold off on a big purchase payment like that. But that's been one very bright spot that we didn't see in 2008, right? It was the mortgage crisis, the
Right.
great financial, recession. Right. And so I think that's been a little bit of a bright spot. And so that's why we say increased mortgage related income. You're probably fanning and fretting those mortgages,
Yeah, sure.
and you're getting service income. Higher than forecasted asset growth. This is the big challenge right now. Is as John and David said, hey, we love, by getting deposit dollars in, it's signaling that members put their money, where they trust it, and that's great. That means we're doing a great job. At the same time, you're being punished because you're having a huge influx of cash. And a huge increase in deposit growth and asset growth, which is impacting your financials, right? So if we look at the next slide, this is a real kind of simple example of net income changes. And if you look on the top left, you can see we budgeted, you can see for about $6.2 million in net income. You can see 90 basis points ROA for 2020.
And we're all high-fiving, right?
Yeah,
that's a great year.
This is about a $700 million credit union example. So yeah, 90 basis points, you're up around 1%. You can't complain about that.
But beginning of the year, it was looking great.
Yeah. But then when you get down to actual, what's happening? Our interest on our loan income's going down because we're pushing some of those payments forward. Our interest expense, our cost of funds is going down, obviously with the Fed dropping rates to zero. We're seeing our investment portfolios not able to earn as much. Our provision from loan loss is probably going up for most credit unions, just as a little bit of safety net in case we start to see some of those people who are saying, I need to skip 30 days, I need to skip 60 days, turn out to end up being delinquencies, charge-offs, which it's likely we're going to see some of that, in the next, quarter or two. Net interest income has gone down. So things like fees, waiving fees, things of that nature in this example. And then interest expense, which is our operating expenses. Now we have seen that go down a little bit. Obviously people working from home, maybe we're not investing in that branch that we were this year. We're, cutting some costs, things of that nature. So you might see some of that.
So like shutting capital projects?
Delaying capital projects. You could see some of that. Okay. Again, this is a theoretical example, but you can see, we projected 6.2 million in net income. Reality is we're probably going to, be in at about 2.1. So our ROA goes to from 90 basis points to 28. So, I think what's important here is to note that some of these things are self-induced, right? Hey, people needed help, so we helped them. Now, if I was solely getting paid based on ROA, that's a hard pill to swallow. Obviously we want to help members, but we also want to achieve our goals. So it's a balance, right?
But you're overweighting or hitting hard some of those line items that are impacting culture, impacting members, impacting employees, right?
Right.
But you're going to get your money one way or the other. which is not the message we're trying to send.
Right. I mean, ultimately, the things that we've done, I mean, they make absolute all the sense in the world. But when you start talking about a variable pay program, especially one that's financially heavy in terms of the metrics, that's where in cases like this, and we saw this in 2008. I mean, I know as a compensation consulting firm, we've said before that if I was in 2008, if I lost 50 basis points, am I achieving the goal? Maybe if everybody else is losing 2%. Right. I mean, so
absolutely.
So it's not just about, you know, being able to make the ROA. It's, you know, how are we comparing to others? One, and two, are we serving the members? And there has to be in times like this, some sort of recognition or exception and seeing the forest through the trees.
Yeah, everything is relative.
Yeah, and that's actually what we call it. A relative benchmark instead of a historical benchmark.
Right.
A relative benchmark. So at the beginning of the year, a CEO can say, oh, tough times are tough all over. Everybody's getting slammed. Nobody's making this. And then you'll see those two bright spots in the marketplace. Somebody has figured out, and you see it all across the country. So if a relative benchmark is part of your pay for performance plan, it works in good times, it works in okay times, and it works in bad times. So literally you could say, we lost less money than everybody else. High five. Yeah, that was a good year.
If we move on to the capital ratio, so capital ratio reminder, this is your equity or your net worth, which basically you get from income, you know, your ROA that you sock away. So it's your net worth over assets. I always call this the rainy day fund. This is where, you know, this is kind of your piggy bank to go into. You know, both if you need to cover expenses, capital projects, all of that. What things that impact it? One of the big ones is deposit growth and asset growth, and those two go hand in hand, because if you remember, that's the denominator. So even if we have the exact same net income, if our assets go up, that denominator, we end up you know, getting hit on the capital position. You're seeing this with a lot of credit unions, where, you know, even though we haven't done anything substantially different, that because the denominator's going up and members are trusting us with their money, which we love, you know, this is a good example here. We had net worth of 72 million in the top. We had about a 10.2% is what we had budgeted for capital, about 700 million in assets. You can see that we're now going to be at 815. In this scenario, we lost a little bit of net worth, so we're down at 88. I mean, if you kind of work the 710 versus 815, we're talking about 15% asset and share growth, which is not unrealistic at all.
That's
what we're seeing.
Yeah, not this year.
Right. So you can, you know, if your metric, and I know net worth was one of the high metrics on the balanced scorecard on the percentages that you showed earlier, you know, you can end up getting hit pretty hard on something that really is out of your control.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of strategic planning, and for years, the classic question we ask is how much is too much capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would have that long-term volunteer say, if 12 is good, 13's better. I like 14. Maybe let's go for 15. And then we would push back and say, come on, you got to give it back to the members, right? And then, like, who's in the driver's seat now? You know, the folks that are going to be able to keep that at a decent level so they can move forward. So we walked our walk, we lived the mission, we had safety and soundness in mind. Maybe we had a little bit more capital than people were nudging us not to have. But today, that rainy day fund, as Brian called it, came in pretty darn handy.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's another issue there as well. And that is, if you take two credit unions in the same community, and one credit union's got 15% capital and the other credit union's got 7% capital, not only is it low by everybody's standards,
Right.
but it's relative to the 15% credit union. And it's really difficult to explain to your board how you're at 7 or 8% and the credit union next door is at 15%.
And then that 15% credit union is going to be doing these initiatives, making a big splash in the community. And you're the 7% person going, I can't afford it. Or I can't do it.
Either that, or they're going to go to 16 and 17%.
Yeah.
But they're going to do something
Yeah.
that's going to make them stronger in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. If you cherish your autonomy, if you want to stay independent, if you don't want people knocking on your merger door, this is why you have this fund to weather the times like this. So one of the things that we talk about in incentive plans and any type of pay plans is it's so important not to change the rules too often. So sometimes when there's a change of control on the board, they want to, just, ball up the paper and let's start with a blank sheet of paper and start over. And every time that, the message you send to your executive team is, oh, here we go again. We're going to have to explain what we do, why we do it. We're not sandbagging the budget. We're really making an honest effort out there to be successful. So much corporate knowledge goes into building a plan. On the volunteer side, so much knowledge goes into the strategic plan of what we can do, how fast we can do it, how we're going to invest in whatever we're going to invest in. So when we look at these plans, if you're going to take a year off, it's incremental. It's not like, oh, we're going to just pick back up like it was January 1st, 2020, and everybody's going to remember what we did and what the parameters were. So that's why we're encouraging people to stay the course this year, because it's not a pay practice. It's not a reward practice. It's a reward and recognition practice is why you do pay for performance. And we lose the linkage if we change the rules. We lose the linkage if we just throw it away and say, hey, we're just going to pay you a one-time bonus because it was a nice year or you worked hard. We've kind of eroded the principles of why we even started this.
Yeah, and I think that there's a whole issue and thought process that if you have a plan and you change the plan, the question then becomes, well, when times are good and you had nothing to do with them being good times, like the sponsor got, X billions of dollars worth of money that they spread out to their employees, or you picked up another field of membership, or whatever the circumstances are, and you've had a phenomenal year that really didn't have a whole lot to do with what you've been working on. Should you change the metrics for that? And the answer is no.
You just made another case for relative benchmarks too.
Right.
The idea that, if it's a booming economy, in a certain town and everybody's rising on the tide, then did you rise more? Right. And conversely, like if it's a tough year.
Right.
So one of the things we wanted to talk about is why historical metrics may be real misleading this year. And obviously we built the case kind of throughout the hour here, but David, want to talk a little bit more about 0809.
We did about 55 surveys in 08, 09, and 10. They weren't all the same credit unions. Not every credit union does it every year, but they basically represented about 3 million consumers. And today we're doing more member surveys, and we now represent about 6 million consumers. What I have been very interested in, and we're just about ready to be able to provide information about this, but what is, I guess the question is, what is the difference between 08 and 09 as far as in member satisfaction, and what is the difference between 08 and 09 as far as employee satisfaction? Because they're both down years or down periods, and they're both extraordinary. And I think what you're going to find is that your satisfaction levels today are much stronger than they were in 2008, 2009. And the reasons being technology, understanding of what the employee needs, understanding of what the member needs, and just a better plan for getting people to work hard, whether they're at home, whether they're in the office, and making sure that they're comfortable with their work environment.
Yeah, we actually had a question come up that's tied on the member satisfaction piece.
Right.
It said, if you let employees work from home, is that a positive or a negative?
I think it has to depend on what type of employees we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make a general statement that it's a good move or it's a bad move. I think it has to do with who you're sending it home and how long you're sending them home for. And if they come in for 3 days or they don't come in at all, there's just so many different factors involved that I think it's difficult to answer that question. But I know that most credit unions that have decided to have remote employees have picked certain departments that can be remote, like the call center, like loan processing, and they've kept people who are face to face with the member, like the people in the branches, back home. At the branches. So the back home people are back home. The in-person people are at the branches, and the management is both.
Yeah.
They come and they go and they do their job, and they don't necessarily have to be there all the time. But I think it really has to do with who you're dealing with.
Well, in March and April, every Fortune 500 CEO got on Bloomberg and said, it's going great. 95% of our folks are working from home. They do those same interviews now and says, we're trying to get people back in the office. And what's interesting is if there was any service component to those companies, what they're seeing is a degradation of customer satisfaction in the contact center. So yes, if the metric is you are at home and you're 98% up and available, I don't know the exact term, but when they,
Yeah,
you're available,
uptime.
uptime. Yeah. What happens is the most important member that you're going to talk today that wants a mortgage or something calls and you're putting clothes in the dryer. So 98% you're there, but it's all those little things you get to do at home. And that's what's frustrating the executive team. And I think we're going to see that in credit unions too. So the question is, yeah, employees love it, but there's also, we talked about this last time, David, remember, if you're having to be teacher / employee, teach your kids, like, please, I don't want to be with my kids anymore. I love them, but
it's like I love my house, but
we'll be working remotely. Please, I have a family. I need to be here.
Yeah. So that's one thing. So, and you think about it, we're a retail services environment. There's just, 60% of our job just can't be done except in certain situations. So we're going to have to balance that. Now, from the employee's perspective, I don't think you're going to have an overwhelming pro or con of working from home.
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
Because some people think it's awesome and some people are going to say, yeah.
Just to finish the historical issue of 2008, 2009, relevance to today. I think what's going to be real interesting is if more credit unions decide to do survey work, as opposed to net promoter, but actually survey their members. I think it would be very interesting to see how they did versus 2008, 2009. Even if they didn't do a survey in 2008, 2009, there's enough information. We have enough information that we can monitor how well you've done over a course of two different extremely difficult circumstances.
Yeah, that's a great point. We had another question come up on when you use relative factors. How do you start the year not knowing what the number is going to be? And that's the point of a relative factor is, your target is, I want to be within a market average or median, and then maybe a standard deviation, positive or negative off of that number to set a range. So that's the beauty of it, is you don't have to spend resources forecasting to what degree the economy is going to be hurt or not hurt. You just go into it saying, I want to be better than the pack. All right. I want to be within a range of the pack to define success. So that's, to me, that's, it's the fear of the unknown. Do I really want to trust it towards the end? I got to set a number, but every time you got to set a number, we're going to be forecasting it every month. So hopefully that answers that question. And then I got one more question before we move on real quick. It said about when they look around their boardroom, they see a lot of baby boomers that work for for-profit companies, and they have seen downtimes, they have seen layoffs, they've seen cyclical processes. Any points of working with that type of volunteer when they've just been crushed at work for so many years?
That's a very difficult question to answer. And if there are any board members on this chat, I'm not answering the question.
Well, we're going to talk about a fictitious credit union, not you listening, but that's the world we live in. You represent your membership, right, and you have to do a good job for those members. And not all of them work for the company you work for, right, but you've been taught, it's been beat on your head to hit a quarterly number. You don't hit a quarterly number, there's a consequence for that. People get laid off. We're in Texas, we're in the oil business. We have neighbors that are severely hurting. If that person's on a board, how can you not transfer that to the boardroom?
Very difficult.
But
There's another question up there on the board. I think Brian would it would be best to answer that.
What on?
When it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I think it needs to be answered.
Oh, the SERP survey?
Yeah, when the SERP survey is going to be done.
Very soon.
I know. I have the last edition on my desk, and if they're waiting for me to approve it, then as far as I'm concerned, it's done. I just don't know who else has been looking at it and who has changes, but it is done.
so as we wrap up our hour now, just a couple more slides here. We don't know yet if this is horrible disaster, near miss, or somewhere in between. But the idea is if you keep and maintain your pay for performance principles and your balanced scorecards, your concept of how you define success stays constant. And remember, reward and recognition. So even if your plan does not pay out $1, the recognition is why is so important in this relationship. Now, one of the things we've spent a lot of time on this year is leadership under crisis. And how do we measure that? And this is a classic textbook. PhDs are written on this. So the 8 things up here are what we see as a good executive and how they handle a crisis, and who are the the top tier, and the folks that are in the middle, and the folks that just wither under crisis. I'm not going through this model today, but we've developed a CEO evaluation tool that a board could give the CEO, or the CEO could give to their C-suite or their executive team. So if you want to copy that, email us and we'll get that out to you, just so you can see. We think it should be a part of the evaluation, not the whole evaluation, but it really gets at how things were done.
I think if you find one of your executives crying in the men's room or the ladies' room, they're not doing that well under crisis.
Yes. and that was me, by the way, he's talking about. So kind of to wrap up again, this all goes back to governance. If you think about it, we asked the question, well, how do you measure relative? How do you measure the qualitative of an evaluation? How do you measure good governance? So these statements are the ideas that, it's like mom, apple pie, Chevrolet, and these governance principles.
I thought it was Toyota.
Well, some years it is, some years it's not. So think about these. The idea is that, we need, Jeff, patriotic music, please.
Oh, let me get that queued up for you.
Okay, thank you. The idea that we commit to having a full spectrum of superior services. We're going to give better cost, same cost as our competitors. We're going to be convenient, easy to access for our members. We believe we want to be a trusted financial advisor to those folks. And what do we find this year? People are definitely taking us up on that one. We want people to recommend us to their friends and family, and we want to be their first choice. All of the things we've talked about today come back to this list, these governance principles that define success or failure for our organization. Not to pay a CEO, not to say good job or bad job, but to the board having a fiduciary responsibility and a moral responsibility to their field of membership, that they're taking care of them. So with that said, we got
that's it.
two more
slides.
2 more slides. Yeah. So you want to answer that question or?
No, no.
Okay. So as we wrap up, just want to let you know, we're here to help. And hopefully today you get some idea in our insights. You got 3 generations of experience in the room today. And, I've said it before, this is David's and mine's 6th once in a lifetime financial crisis. And, it's playing out. We're coming out and we're starting to see the light. So if you need help, we're happy to do that. And then we just have one quick announcement that I don't know if everybody's heard yet.
D. Hilton Associates made the Forbes list of America's best executive recruiting firms for 2020. And that was done independently. 16,000 recruiters and candidates were asked their opinion. We were not asked our opinion. We didn't even know it was happening. And I just want to congratulate all the people in our executive recruiting area, and also our compensation area, and also our SERP area, because they all fall into the same category of helping with the executive recruiting. So thank you all.
Okay. Thanks, David. just as a kind of a programming note, in 2 weeks, we're going to have our next webinar, and that will be about our comp forecast for staff. And like I said, this is the 19th year we've done that. So our clients are going to start seeing that information next week. And then in 2 weeks, we'll kind of broadcast our findings on that. So that will look at the whole reward and recognition spectrum. So we'll talk about base pay. What are you doing for salary budgets? What are you doing for merit increase budgets? We'll look at what benefits are going to change or modify. We'll look at exec benefits, and we'll look at incentive plans and pay for performance as well. So it's a good document. A lot of people use it for forecasting and for budgeting next year. And again, I can't thank the guys out there enough who, took our calls and talked about what they're seeing in the future. So it is definitely a joint effort. It's not just a D. Hilton, prognostication. It's really, we've got some great thought leaders among our clients that are helping us put that together. So look for the document. And again, it'll be on our website in a couple of weeks where you can pull it down if you're not going to get it from the client list.
I'd just like to add one thing, talking about intelligence and the help that we've had. There are 4 of us sitting in this room, and we are all socially distanced. So to make the people who are out there comfortable, we are socially distanced. We're also mentally distanced. So we're not going to catch anybody's intelligence. So I just want to thank everybody again for listening to us, and the questions were great, and we look forward to doing this again.
And again, they're giving me these hand signals that I have no idea what that means.
Well,
help me, Jeff.
Do we have one more question? You want to field that
yeah.
question? I can put that through for you. Okay. So
It's a long question.
It's a long question, so forgive me if I go through this one, but our credit union heavily weight assets growth in the CEO incentive plan. So despite the economy, assets have grown with an influx of deposits, but this has been a particularly difficult year for employees who will not or who will receive no such benefit. What is the relationship between employee satisfaction and participation that a CEO or perception that a CEO has been overcompensated? Longer term, is there some kind of cap on CEO median comp ratio recommendation that you have for credit unions of a particular size? The dynamic seems to be relentless, increasing CEO compensation for good and bad times.
John, I think what they're getting at is target and stretch goals, right?
Absolutely.
The problem is that it sounds like there's absolutely no ceiling on asset growth.
And next time, if you write a question that long, make it multiple choice. I have to
column A, column B.
But yeah, so in plans, let's start, because we have a few minutes. Let's start with the idea of optics. And you've nailed the idea of optics. How can we pay one employee more than another employee when times are bad? Why do we pay a mortgage group incentives and we don't pay frontline people incentives? We have to match the pay practices to the marketplace to be competitive. The problem that some credit unions get in is if we try to do one size fits all, you overcompensate some and you undercompensate some, and then nobody's happy. So at the executive level, they have an opportunity to get paid, but it's reward and recognition. So if you have targets, that's how you should drive a plan. But this concept of stretch, there should be a ceiling to what a person can earn at any level, because that gives you just some boundaries to be, to kind of address the risk. Now, if we were a for-profit company and you were, if I was giving you equity, right?
Right.
You would still slash and burn. You don't care about the employees. You don't care about your customer. You don't care about anything other than hitting that number. Credit unions, we're going to do it differently. We're going to do it based on the values, the strategic plan, the board's mission. And if you do that, the optics will filter down right. Now, nobody's supposed to talk about their pay, but everybody kind of knows what's happening. Mm-hmm. The beauty of a 990 is, guess what? Everybody gets to know all the business of your top 5 employees.
Executive 2 years ago.
But the point is, yeah, if you want to absolutely know what happened 2 years ago, I know.
You got a great source on
what website you can go to find that, which, we actually did a study 4 years ago. We looked at 20 credit unions in California that were $1 billion or above. 50% of the 990s were wrong. I actually called up one of the CFOs and I said, hey, you have this it's a 5-figure number in a benefits column, and I've only seen like $7 or $8 grand, and it was like 80. And I said, what's this? Oh, my bad. I put it in the wrong column. There's no punitive, consequence for doing that. So let's get back to the question real quick. So the question is, the optics. So what we want to create, and especially pay for performance, works great at the lowest levels of the organization. So instead of an employee comparing them to another employee, we want them focused on what they could do with their opportunity. So I'd love to say, Jeff, you could be the best paid consultant in the United States if and only you're the best performer, best producer, best rainmaker out there. And in the periods where you're not, there's a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So those credit unions that still have tenure-based plans and step increases, unless you do something really, really bad, you go to the next step. That's real hard for employees to justify how they get paid and how that executive gets paid. So I guess that's a long answer now. The long answer to your question is make sure pay for performance is prevalent. Don't be afraid to have different pay programs under your pay umbrella. And then people will focus on their opportunity and not the grass is greener. The executives get all the great stuff and we don't, and that type of thing. So if you need more, happy to talk offline on that one.
Fantastic.
All right, let's get everybody out of here. So,
all right, we are definitely past the hour. We did a good job of keeping it within the realm.
Plus or minus
1 minute. We can accept that. Like I said, this was recorded, so it will be posted on our website afterwards. We'll also be sending out a survey shortly after the broadcast. Let us know how we're doing. Go ahead and take an opportunity to fill that out. Also, that survey will give you an opportunity to ask for particular topics that you would like to have covered. So let us know what we can change, what we can do better, and what we could talk about next time. But up until that point,
why don't we put a place for them to ask a question on that survey as well, so we can get questions on that survey in addition to all the other information.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's another place where they can ask questions.
Did you have any questions about the presentation?
Or do you have a question in general?
In general,
Yeah,
definitely happy to follow up with anybody that wants to. Yeah,
absolutely. If you like a copy of this presentation that we used, you can go ahead and email me at jeff@dhilton. I'll be happy to forward that along to you. And no more questions. Looks like we are good to go. Thank you so much for joining us. We really do sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us, and we'll catch you again on the next time. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. Stay healthy. Alrighty. Bye-bye.